Welcome to worship in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Charlotte. Just last Sunday, we welcomed the president of our Unitarian Universalist Association to our congregation and to this pulpit. She reminded us in a pointed way that for all of our sense of independence, we share a deep connection with others in our liberating religion. In part, what we share is a clarity about the multiple sources of our living tradition. We recognize the influence of direct experience, of words and deeds of prophetic people, of wisdom from the world's religions, of humanist teachings. And today we join with Unitarian Universalist congregations all across the country, each in our own way, in honoring Jewish and Christian teachings, which, as we say in articulating this source, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Today we gather in the spirit of Passover and of Easter. We attend with deep respect to each of these stories. We do so in a religion rooted in liberation. Today, as we encounter spiritual stories of liberation, we awake again to our personal and shared desire for expansive, life-giving freedom.
For holy days on which we recall the old stories, we light the flame. For Passover, which reminds us of the courage and strength of those seeking freedom in the past, we light the flame. For Easter, which reminds us that love is our greatest challenge, we light the flame. For gathering today in this sacred space, we light the flame. For the opportunity to be together as a community, to remember the past, to place for our future, to be alive in our present.
Our first reading is from the contemporary poet Alain René Bozarth, titled Passover Remembered. It's a contemporary recounting of that liberation story of enslaved Hebrews from Exodus. She writes, "Pack nothing. Bring only your determination to serve and your willingness to be free. Don't wait for the bread to rise. Take nourishment for the journey, but eat standing. Be ready to move at a moment's notice. Do not hesitate to leave. Leave your old ways behind. Fear, silence, submission. Only surrender to the need of the time to love justice and walk humbly with your God. Do not take time to explain to the neighbors. Tell only a few trusted friends and family members. Then begin quickly, before you have time to sink back into the old slavery. Set out in the dark.
Our second reading by Claribel Alegria and Resurrección. I woke up suddenly and began laughing down to my toes. More golden sun without that veil, more keen my hearing for your burning voice. The scars begin to hurt. The odor of jasmine, more jasmine, fuller the clouds in the sky more azure. Jubilantly, I laugh again. The eyes of that child, more shadowed, more pained. Once again, on the crest of the wave, my desert of love flowering anew.
Even when we don't want to, we often notice them, desperate, frantic, disheveled. They're the ones at the airline ticket counter, their bulging suitcases unzipped, their belongings all a tumble, personal items laid bare to the prying eyes of the world as they shift contents from bag to bag, trying to lighten it below the airline's luggage weight limit. They're cramming various items into their carry-on, itself already swollen and strained, hoping to avoid an exorbitant charge. Then we meet them, their kind, again at the gate as we board. Those schlepping a collection of bags that would strain a Sherpa, are rolling a massive suitcase sizable enough to contain the collected works of Shakespeare. And they're utterly outraged when the airline attendant predictably calls them out. Oh, the indignation, the play acting of surprise as if suddenly they've been singled out to be subjected to a completely new and utterly arbitrary set of regulations. Wait, did I say them? Well, perhaps someone here has been one of those people. Not to put too fine a point on things, but I suppose I should say, perhaps someone else has also been that person. Just one more book, one extra jacket, another pair of shoes. I'm sure it will all fit until it doesn't. A couple of years ago, I was boarding a very long overdue flight, trying to sneak my not exactly dainty camera bag alongside a briefcase and a suitcase onto a flight, only to gum up the whole operation when I was called out for my offense. To add to my chagrin, once I was finally on board, I ended up directly across the aisle from an old friend who I had not seen for years. He immediately made the connection. You were that guy that was holding us up with 3 bags. Robert Frost captured a similar experience in his poem, The Armful. For every parcel I stoop down to seize, I lose some other off my arms and knees. And the whole pile is slipping, bottles, buns, extremes too hard to comprehend at once. Yet, nothing I should care to leave behind. Early on in Walden, Henry David Thoreau mocks fellow Concordians whose very lives are lived that way. I see young men, my townsmen, he writes, whose misfortune it is to have inherited farms, houses, barns, cattle, and farming tools. For, he notes, these are more easily acquired than gotten rid of. How many a poor immortal soul have I met, Thoreau smirks, well nigh crushed and smothered under its load, creeping down the road of life. Oh, such a sad fate, believes Henry Thoreau, to be encumbered by so much. Poet Alain René Bossart offers an imaginative set of instructions to begin her lengthy poem about those enslaved Hebrews on the eve of their long-awaited emancipation. She begins with a simple line: pack nothing. Pack nothing. Bring only your determination to serve and your willingness to be free. To be free. This is a story of liberation, of a people formed into being by an inspiring, upsetting Passover tale. It's a mythic account, a complex, ambiguous, morally problematic tale, offering, as with all other such stories, a glimpse not so much into how life should be, but rather into how life is. It gives us no unsullied exemplars and is at least as psychologically complex as those Greek myths or the Star Wars and Indiana Jones episodes of George Lucas, with no more claim to historical veracity than any of these. And while there may be some inclined to take such tales literally, to believe their claims at face value, and accordingly to be variously inspired or incensed, I long ago stopped being one of them. Rest assured, no actual frogs, locusts, or people were harmed in the making of this myth. We revisit it not to shape belief, but to invite reflection, to remind ourselves both of our religious past and perhaps of who we are as human beings. To ask, how might this be our personal story? Might be. Most certainly not must be, for we are not that sort. Anyone here today wishing to be free? Freer, perhaps? Free of some situation, some impediment, some limitation, some restraint. The poet's summary may be operating instructions for us. Pack nothing. Bring only your determination to serve and your willingness to be free. That's not what happened in the Exodus account, however. Only days after their miraculous liberation, only days into their desert wandering, their extra baggage surfaces. Here, we'll let poet Dorothy Sayler have the say. Security became a thing of the past. Things got tough. Consumer goods were scarce. The people grumble. Would to God we had died in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and when we did eat bread to the full. The people grumble. If only we had some meat. Remember the fish we ate in Egypt for free? The cucumbers, melons, onions, garlic. Now all we ever get is manna. Can you imagine? They're actually nostalgic for Egypt. Actually wishing they could go back, re-enter captivity, lower the gate, close the door, settle back into the old oppressive yet familiar way of things. Baggage. Holding on to deeply ingrained emotional baggage, dragging the past through the sands, pushing the past down the nowhere to be found road of their now liberated, not very liberated lives, unwilling, unable to let go. And here it is that today's two tales intersect. The other, that grounding, founding story for our Christian friends, colleagues, neighbors, beloved family members, some of whom are members of this congregation. The one about resurrection, about life and death and life. It too a wildly imaginative, mythically rich account, one not easily flattened out into any kind of literalism. But if you actually read these sacred stories, you come to understand that there's less about alleluia than about anxiety. Miraculous grace tempered by mournful goodbyes. The stories about resurrection form one long farewell. None is more poignant than an encounter between Mary Magdalene and Jesus in the garden early on that first Easter. Mary, deep in grief over the death of her teacher and friend, comes to visit the tomb. Sees a man she mistakes for a gardener. Then she recognizes him. Jesus, alive again. She reaches out to embrace him, but she hears those words that ring down through so much of the history of Western art. Noli me tangere. Don't touch me. Don't cling to me. Don't try to hold on to me. Let me go. My teacher, former U.S. Poet Laureate Robert Hass, captures that poignance poetically. For Magdalene, of course, the resurrection didn't mean she'd got him back. It meant she'd lost him in another way. Do not hesitate to leave your old ways behind. Fear, silence, submission. That's how those poetic Passover instructions continue. Only surrender to the need of the time to love justice and walk humbly with your God. Then begin quickly, before you have time to sink back into the old slavery. Set out, she writes. Set out in the dark. When 30 years after her departure, Universalist minister and leading suffragette Olympia Brown returned to her beloved congregation in Racine, Wisconsin, to preach. She rooted her remarks in words from a Hebrew psalm. Lift high the gates, open wide the doors, give liberty to all. Ours, she said, ours is a religion rooted in liberation, radical liberation. What's keeping you from being as free as you might be? What door still remains closed? What restraint still remains in place. It might be, as it was for those emancipated wilderness wanderers, it might be nostalgia. The longing to hold on to how things have been, to cling to some recent or distant past. Your energy is focused not forward, but back. Even Egypt somehow seems better than the road on which you now find yourself. It might be fear, a debilitating hesitation to take a risk, to claim a new possibility, to claim your fullest potential, to throw the doors wide open and set out. It might be resentment, holding on to an old hurt, weighted down by the desire for revenge, to exact some pain that might even the score. Or similarly, anger, bitterness, a daily dose of bile that causes you to belittle and deride others. It might be old habits, or maybe an addiction, an inability alone to conquer that which holds and hampers you. Perhaps shame, regret, embarrassment about some moral failing. It might be a failure of imagination, a refusal to invest in the spiritual discipline of deep probing, deep listening, deep praying that might open the door to some new, more fulfilling way of life. It may be greed, some insatiable desire for more and more that keeps you from experiencing the satisfaction of generosity. We cannot open wide the door to fullest freedom with, as Frost put it, an armful, stuff to which we are now clinging. We cannot open wide the door to fullest freedom while trying to hold on to what has been. As the lines of connection with my mom continue to fray, as dementia takes her further and further from the capacity to comprehend and connect, I find myself both profoundly sad and not infrequently sorting through so many old memories. Oh, the Easters of my childhood were wonder-filled. New clothes, a packed church, glorious music, a sense of deep connection and meaning. Then Sunday dinner with my beloved grandparents, gathered around that familiar table. I cherish all of that. The memories sustain me in my perennial sadness. But I've long since let go of what Easter meant to them and to me. That faith unraveled for me years, decades ago, no longer proves sustaining or inspiring. I had to let it go. That was not easy. And there are still days I miss such assurance and hope. In its place, over a long period of time, I have found my way to something else, something quite different, something that challenges me, that lays a claim on my life. It didn't, however, require me to sever all ties, to disconnect entirely, to burn every bridge back to the tradition of my childhood and adolescence. Instead, it has invited me to live imaginatively, to find in it the kind of meaning I now find also in poetry, a meaning of imagination and of beauty. Easter is no apex in the landscape of my spiritual life, but there is yet a place for it still, for me and for many of you, just as Passover of a very different sort still occupies a place in the spiritual lives of others of you here. The journey is for each of us to take for ourselves, to find both meaning and the experience of being fully alive where they are most robust. It's not for any of us either to prescribe or proscribe for any other. All we can do is let go for ourselves, open our own doors, and journey forth in our own faith. Again and again, I find myself returning to those guiding words of David White. They ring with special relevance today. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. The world was made to be free in. Give up all other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive. Anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. It's too small for you.
Welcome to today's service. We're honored to have guests with us. Our members would like to greet you following the service. So that we might do so, if you are visiting, please raise your hand and keep it up. Thank you. Members, please take note of guests seated near you. After the service, invite them to join you for coffee and conversation in Freeman Hall. Should it enhance your experience of future services, you can find both a large print order of service and a personal hearing assistance device on the table at the entrance to the sanctuary. If you'd like to learn more about us, please fill out a yellow card and place your completed yellow card in an offering basket when they are passed later in the service. Members with a life event to share can do so on the reverse side of the card. You'll find them, along with offering envelopes, on the clipboards at the end of the row. Please begin passing them down your row now. Some returning visitors may be interested in hearing about how to become a member. If so, talk with our membership coordinator, Kelly Green, which is me. My contact information is on the back of your order of service. Again, to each of you, welcome. When I left my hometown of Buffalo 20 years ago, I thought that leaving my family, my friends, and all the old ways of that city would be the thing that set me free. I hadn't realized that different places just block our freedom in different ways. During my first years in Charlotte, I thought freedom meant spending lots of money entertaining and indulging myself. That just trapped me in a mirage where I couldn't understand why I felt so empty if my life looked so fun. And then I started noticing, in part because of the Undoing Racism training I attended, all this stuff I've been carrying around for years and years, baggage that seemed so much a part of me that I barely noticed it was blocking my path. So what would I need to let go of to get free? Among other things, any inclination to deny or downplay the inherent worth and dignity of any person, including myself, or to let someone who isn't affirming my inherent worth and dignity steal my joy. The idea that working to open the door to freedom for myself and to support others in opening their own doors is less than my spiritual duty. I need to let go of the upper middle class white values that seeped into me decades ago because they were the right way to be, and instead embrace my Black middle class heritage and way of life. I would need to let go of that tendency to ignore or deny any new, comfortable barriers that appear. And I would need to get rid of any thought of waiting for someone else to open the doors and allow me to be free. I've recently started asking myself, in tiny bits and in small situations, what would I do if I were powerful or wise or beautiful or free? just beginning to imagine being free is changing something in me.
I add my own welcome to the one you just heard from my powerful, wise, beautiful, free colleague. Thank you for spending a portion of your Sunday here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Charlotte. There's a session for those of you who are visitors. Raise your hand one more time if you don't mind. Take a look around, everyone. Wow, very nice to have so many guests with us today. There's a session for you downstairs. By all means, step across first and get coffee or tea and join us for Getting to Know Us. It's a conversation with a longtime member of the congregation. It's downstairs after the service. There are many ways to be involved in the life of our congregation, just a few of which are listed in your order today. I particularly call your attention to the work that our Board of Trustees has been doing over the past several weeks and months in developing their proposed new mission statement. They would like to share that with those of us in the congregation, and there's information in your order about a number of sessions that they are offering to do just that. Take note of one of those sessions. Participate so that you will be prepared in our June congregational conversation to vote on our proposed new mission statement. If you've been reading our online communication currents or perhaps our member Facebook page, then you are tracking through a series of communications that we are offering to the congregation in preparation for the arrival of our new minister, Reverend Eve Stevens, on the 1st of May, which, if you'll give me just a moment, I can tell you how many hours that is from right now. I'm delighted, and I know you're excited about Eve's arrival, and I hope you'll take note of the information that we are offering you to remind you why we felt Eve was exactly the right person at this time in the life of our congregation. A little bit more about her and about how we will imagine working together, both of us as ministers of this congregation and in conjunction with our incredibly engaged professional staff and with all of us as a congregation. Next Sunday will be one of my last opportunities. In fact, it'll be the last full opportunity for me to offer a service here as the only minister. I can't tell you how glad I am about that. I'd like to share with you on next Sunday about a significant change in my perspective over these 15 years. And I'd welcome having you here both for one of the services and also at 10:30 for our dialogue session. Part of why we come together every Sunday is to open our hearts a little wider, to feel a little more deeply all the rightful causes of joy and celebration and all the reasons for pain in this world and in our own lives. We enter this room as those carrying pain, often quietly and privately. We remember with love, and on this day, Gilbert Bailey and the whole Bailey family as they grieve the loss of Gilbert's mother. We hold the community of Sacramento in our prayers, torn apart right now by another shooting of another unarmed black man. We hold the pain of this world in our hearts. today marks some special occasion of joy, of celebration, of remembrance, of concern for you, you're invited to come forward during the playing of the offertory later in the service. Light a candle, member, visitor alike, holding, please, the silence in the room as you do. For now, I invite all of us to a time of meditation and aspiration, the opportunity to breathe deeply together. I invite you to quiet yourself. To breathe a little deeper. To come as fully present to this moment as you can. Although we have been made to believe that if we let go, we will end up with nothing, life reveals just the opposite. That letting go is the real path to freedom. What if life were calling you to let go? What if love? What if your better self? What if God? What if truth were inviting you to find deeper freedom by letting go? What might that mean? What might you let go of? What gate might lift? What door might open wide? Although we have been made to believe that if we let go, we will end up with nothing, life reveals just the opposite. That letting go is the real path to freedom.
We are so much more together than any one of us could be on our own. In recognition that our shared resources are part of what make this community powerful, we will now give and receive the offering. join me in an affirmation of our faith? It takes